Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and this evening I finished reading The Spoilt City by Olivia Manning. I enjoyed it. It was a really effective fictional treatment of the horror and fear that I think any individual would have felt encountering the evil of Nazi Germany. This book is set in the summer and autumn of 1940 in Bucharest, Romania, which is what the Spoilt City of the title refers to. And it's based on Manning's experiences and the experience of her husband as newlyweds in real life. The books were written in the 1960s. And there were aspects of the book that were really uncomfortable to read. Not because Manning was like, there's not graphic violence. There is this sense of tension and terror that just creeps throughout the novel. And it's because of the historical context, the real life historical context, the fact that there were millions of individuals, but specifically millions of Jews who were flat out murdered by Nazi Germany. And that there was a state machine that was operated to systematically murder individuals. And then that's just always, it's one of the reasons I don't read a huge amount of fiction set in World War II. But I thought the book was really good at showing that and showing how that violence begins to creep closer and closer into individuals who think they're safe. And so we see different characters who Manning sketched really well in the first book, The Great Fortune, and they were interesting, or they were funny, or they seemed courageous. And then in this book, we see them a couple of times, and then another character tells us, that person's body was found, murdered in a street, or that person's body was found, it looks like the person was thrown out of, a moving car or a window, or so-and-so is missing. And so Manning sort of has built this cast and then slowly starts pulling people down to show just how dangerous and evil, that the Nazis were, but also that the evil that people encountered. And we see that as well with the city of Bucharest, which is initially the Paris of the East. It has culture, it has cafes, it has music, it has all this incredible cuisine. And then as sort of the net tightens, and ultimately Romania is treated as really a satellite of Nazi Germany. As that net tightens, there's, meatless days. People are described as waiting in line to get basic groceries. All they can get is cabbage. We start to see like the little ways lives change, fewer people on the streets, or people trying to crowd onto trains to escape from one region as portions of Romania are partitioned off, where we have a character who goes over into Transylvania in that region, and then on his train ride back he has to like find a way through the back, like the kitchen of the dining car, to get back on the train because they've locked it. They've locked all the doors onto the train and locked all the windows so that none of the peasants can get on to flee back to Romania as Hungary takes over Transylvania. And so we see that, and it, again, like I said, it's really could be uncomfortable at times. We also, of course, are focused on Guy and Harriet Pringle, the newlywed couple who've been married for about a year now. And it's been quite a year of marriage. We see their relationship change in a few ways. Harriet seems to find more voice. Guy is sort of this, is always just running and trying to like put out these fires almost. He's constantly, well, I'm going to run a summer school, and I'm going to, make sure that all of the Jewish students can come and learn English at this summer school because they've pretty much been ostracized. I'm going to do this. And Harriet is slowly finding ways to like stand firm and say, okay, what do we need to do next? Like, is this a safe choice? How are we going to make this work? A young man who had been in the first book, Sasha Drucker, his father has been arrested and is basically being tortured in jail. He's been conscripted. He manages to escape because he realizes that the Romanian soldiers are now just casually murdering the Jewish men who are in their units. And so he escapes and makes it back to Bucharest, but he's starving, he's ragged, and he's now sort of hiding on the roof. And the Pringles don't think of hiding him on the roof solely because he's Jewish. They think of hiding him on the roof because he's deserted the army from conscription, and so that's why they have to hide him. And so the danger is there, and it's not necessarily directed at the Pringles, but it's becoming directed more and more at those around them and those that are very close to them. And as an example of sort of how Manning shows the idea of changes within Bucharest and sort of that spoilt city idea. Romania then had been sleek and prosperous, a land of plenty. Even this cafe, one of the cheapest, had given plates of olives, cheese and gherkins when one brought a glass of wine. Now those things were scarce. She seemed to remember the water, beneath its haze of heat, as translucent as crystal. Now it smelt of weed. The crusted surf round the cafe held captive floating bottles, orange peel, matchboxes, and paper bags. As for the cafe itself, it reflected in its grayish weathered timbers, its crippled chairs, its dirty table papers, the decay of the whole country. And so Manning gives us these moments where we see the way the light hits certain rivers or lakes, the way that a set of woods is described as being almost like a cluster of plums. And so we have these different pieces, but we also start to see how the city of Bucharest truly has been spoiled. That as the Iron Guard, which is sort of this like almost like fascist group, has risen back, and even though a number of their leaders have been executed, they've risen back and they're demanding that the king abdicate. As that's going on, Bucharest truly feels like a spoiled city. But in the very next paragraph, Manning takes us right back into that relationship between the Pringles. Harriet, she, that is Harriet, sighed, feeling in the gummy September heat all the tedium of the year repeating itself. Guy, thinking she was bored, said, nearly finished, but she was not bored. Becoming conditioned to Guy's preoccupation, she was learning the resort of her own reflections. With him, in any case, talk was too general for intimacy. He despised the metaphysical and the personal. He did not gossip. She was beginning to believe that what he had lacked was a fundamental interest in the individual, a belief that would astonish him, were she to accuse him. But she did not accuse him. Once she had believed that finding him she had found everything. Now she was not so sure. But here they were, wrecked together on the edge of Europe, as on an island, and she was learning to keep her thoughts to herself. And so we see this aspect of like, it is not just the city that is spoiled, but there are aspects of their relationship that seemed one thing. And it's not that their marriage or relationship have spoiled, but it has changed. And they've recognized that change. And I think Manning captures their relationship in a really interesting way. And she did it in The Great Fortune. And now we see, okay, they've been married for a year now. And they're in a very dangerous situation. How does that change? And we see more and more of Harriet's voice. But we also, for the first time, get Guy as a narrator in sort of that third person where we're in his mind a little bit, which was a nice addition, I felt. Prince Yakimov is back. He's just a disaster. He's constantly wheeling and dealing, lying, pretending to be this, pretending to be that, begging money, just the worst. And he makes a vital choice where he thinks he's being funny, and he ends up really being a tragic mistake. So it's a well-crafted book, but it also has this one bit that is absolutely hysterical, and it is the idea that these English teachers who are teaching English at this university continue to want to put up this like British front where they're doing their part. And so they con a Cambridge professor who's a friend of someone else's to come out into what is close to being a war zone at this point, as of course the London Blitz is going on, to come out here to give this lecture. And he's going to give this lecture on English poetry from Chaucer through Tennyson. And so this professor is described for us. He's sitting with the Pringles. As she, that's Harriet, spoke, he, that's Lord Pinkrose, dropped his glance and his cheeks grew pink. Startled out of ill humor, he said pleasantly enough, I take it the books are yours? She explained that the books, mostly second-hand, had been collected by Guy and brought to Romania in sacks. He nodded his interest. Although he did not look at Harriet, he kept his attention pointedly in her direction, and when Guy broke in on the talk, he looked aside in a discouraging way. Guy had several volumes of poems by poets he had known when a student. He began taking these down to show Pinkrose's signatures and inscriptions, but Pinkrose was not impressed. These young men have a lot to learn, he said. Guy leapt at once to the defense of the poets of his generation, and while he talked, he refilled Pinkrose's glass. too preoccupied and short-sighted to see when it was full. He went on pouring until the Madeira ran from the table and dripped onto Pink Rose, who tutted in exasperation. Full of apologies, Guy began to rub Pink Rose's trousers, and Pink Rose, tutting again, moved his legs away. That Pink Rose is a stalking horse for none other than Lord Dunsany, the great English fantasist. And so the Spoilt City ends with the German trade delegation, political delegation, Gestapo, and finally military occupation of Bucharest and of Romania. And with that, Harriet has fled to Athens, and Guy is still in Bucharest. But I think, like, if I was trying to pull out what is the one message Manning wanted within this book, it comes when Harriet and Guy are talking about whether or not it would be a good idea to hunt birds. And she said she doesn't like it. And he goes, "Come on, tell us, why do you love them?" And Harriet says, "Because they are innocent, the animals." Guy says, "And we are guilty?" She shrugged. "Aren't we? We're human animals that maintain ourselves at the cost of our humanity." And I think that's part of the idea is, at what cost, do we seek our own comfort? And when the Pringles take in Sasha or try to get a passport for him to be able to escape to safety, they're making sacrifices, but they're also they're making sacrifices, and they're trying to do some small piece of good for someone else who needs it. And so that was that message of hope nestled within the novel was something I enjoyed. It reminded me a little bit of Elizabeth Bowen's The Last September. Alan Furst's Blood of Victory. I'm going to try and read this before I read the third book in the Fortunes of War. But this is a spy novel set in sort of Romania and Bulgaria in the fall of 1940. And then, of course, there was a character who's based on Lord Dunsany, so his fantasy tales. But anyways, that's The Spoilt City, Fortunes of War 2 by Olivia Manning. Thanks, everyone.